Hello and welcome to Jazz Across the Pond. Jazz interviewing reimagined, a brand new and a very exciting bringing together of two great nations. It's jazz talking like you've never seen or heard it before. Yep, we'd like to welcome the jazz members from all over the different groups and all around the globe. Warm welcome, and all our religious listeners. I know we're getting more and more people talking about this. This is the most talked about show ever. So without further ado, let's bring my fellow colleague on. Here he is. So it's a very warm welcome from Jazz Across the Pond from myself, Roger Lee, aka the Jazz Cat.
And I'm Kevin Goolsby, and they call me Mr. G.
Mr. G, the Starsky to my Hutch.
I thought it was going to be the other way around this week, Roger. How come I don't ever get to be Starsky?
As long as we're not Huggy Bear, I don't mind. I think we're showing our age a little bit on that one there, aren't we?
Exactly. Well, how about last week's interview with Gianni Manussi and Ollie Silk?
I tell you what, incredible interview. To have the two of them there with technology and a chat, it was brilliant. And I tell you, we've had some great feedback, some wonderful listeners going. I've had a few people actually go, when's this duet album out? No, we just lit the fuse on that one there. I think we've got them thinking about it, and hopefully their record label is thinking about it, going, do you know what? I think those two guys, the Jazz Across the Bar, I think there's some mileage in that. So cross fingers. What a great one. You enjoyed the interview?
And I think we deserve credit if that duo project comes out, too.
Absolutely. Well, I tell you what. So anybody, again, if anybody's missed and wondering what we're talking about, it is still available on YouTube. Have a look at it. It was a great interview. And to see the banter. And I think they took the mick out of us with our matching shirts. So tonight we've made sure that we're not matching tonight.
Exactly. I'm going with a solid, and you've got on another flowered shirt.
I have, yeah. A nice subtle shirt as usual for me. Anyway, without further ado, let's bring on tonight's special guest.
Hi, this is jazz guitarist Les Sabler from Nashville, Tennessee, and you're watching me on Jazz Across the Pond with the Jazz Cat and Mr. G. I hope you enjoy it.
So it's a very good evening, and it's a fabulous, we are so pleased and so proud to welcome onto Jazz Across the Pond tonight. He's sat there in his studio, he's eagerly waiting. We've had a couple of conversations, and it's going to be a great interview. Ladies and gentlemen of Jazz Across the Pond, please join me as we welcome the one, the only, Mr. Les Sabler.
Thank you. Nice to see you guys.
Did I pronounce that correct?
It's Sabler.
Sabler. Right. I want to make sure we get it right. That's absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm very impressed at your studio. That is very impressive.
Thank you.
We're going to be looking forward. You're holding your guitar, and I know you're going to be. Our listeners are going to be really, really enamored. You're going to be playing us a little bit as well. So let's just start things off first of all. So Les, we were born and raised in Montreal, Canada. Graduated as a jazz major from the Concordia University. So did you come from a musical family at all?
Not at all. Just got really into music when I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan in 1964. It happened to a lot of my friends, and we all ran out and got guitars. A few of us got drums, but most of us bought guitars back then.
Yeah,
I had no musical background in my family other than my sisters and I were given piano lessons when we were very young, and that was it. Neither of my parents played any instruments.
I think the piano was mandatory, wasn't it, for any child? But we've had quite a few interviews and people that were drummers, and they were saying that because when you go on tour, the drums, they're the biggest thing. You know, when you finish a gig and you go to part, the guitarist is quite easy. Put it in the guitar and away you go. So I think you're a fabulous guy. We love you on that. So at what age were you then when you first started to play the guitar?
I was 9.
Wow.
9. Yeah, I've been playing. I don't know if I should talk about all the age issues, but it was a long time ago.
And who introduced you then to the guitar then?
Just like I said, I mean, I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan in '64, and I just said, that looks like a lot of fun. I want to get a guitar. And I just found a way to get one, and self-taught for a while, and then took a few lessons informally before I got serious about it.
Now, I know that Kevin is very eager to ask a question. Kevin, if you just wouldn't mind just 1 second, because our researchers have found out that, like myself, Liz he worked on the cruise ships and did a short stint on the cruise ships out of Miami and that. You had your own trio, apparently, yes?
That's correct. Back in the late 70s. That was my first gig after my time at University of Miami.
Incredible. Go on, Kevin, you're eager.
Well, that took us right into my first question. Was less than 1978, you relocated to Florida and enrolled at graduate school at the University of Miami's jazz department. Was pursuing graduate studies the reason for moving from Montreal to Miami, or were there other factors at play?
Well, my parents had moved the year before to Sarasota on the west coast of Florida, and I had read about the jazz program at University of Miami in Downbeat magazine, and it was amazing what was going on there at the time. Pat Metheny was there. There was just so much great music coming out of there, and it seemed like, since my parents were already in the state, that would be a logical thing for me to do after graduation. I wasn't convinced that staying in Montreal was the best thing for me to do for my future, and so I moved to Florida, and I had a great time at Miami. I wasn't there that long, but it was a really good experience for me.
And of course, you went from the ice cold to the blistering heat of summer in Florida. I guess that was an adjustment.
Yeah, it was brutally hot when I got there. It was not anything I had ever experienced before. The only times I'd been to Florida were in the winter times when it was pretty nice, and I got to Miami and it was somewhere around 100. It was late summer. So,
Right.
but I adjusted. It was okay.
Yeah.
Well, back to very quickly, but I mean, because Montreal, I mean, I've been very fortunate. Whilst working on the cruise ships, we used to do the St. Lawrence River and go down to Montreal, Quebec, although I don't remember much about nights in Quebec. Never mind, that's another story. And then sail back. So Montreal was I love them, but I can understand because we interview so many artists from Florida, and there is such a jazz base in Florida. Now, are we right in saying that whilst living in Miami, you performed with several prominent jazz, Latin, and R&B bands, and that laid an important foundation to your career. Is that correct?
Yes. One of the last groups before I left Miami to move to Sarasota back in 1980 was a guy named Willie Vega, who was a really great South American performer and composer. We had a large group. It was an 8-piece group, and we thought big things were going to happen. It didn't work out that way, but I learned a lot from that, from my exposure to Latin music directly from the source, and playing with great musicians, and really had a lot of influence on future writing and recordings that I did.
Well, that's over the years. I mean, you've already alluded to it. You worked with Brian Bromberg, Jeff Lorber, Eric Marienthal, Ricky Peterson, Richard Elliott, and Alan Sams, just to mention a few. You've also been the opening act for Jeff Lorber, Richard Elliott, with Spyro Gyra, Michael Lincoln, and also Fatburger. So obviously you've had an opportunity to work with some of the exceptional jazz artists of today, but you've also have talked about a lot of your inspiration came from legendary guitarists Larry Carlton, Lee Ritenour, and George Benson. So other than those influences, did anything else weigh heavily on your direction as you became a jazz artist?
Well, growing up in Montreal, there was some prominent jazz guitarists on the scene that were living there that really influenced me. One was Ted Quinlan, who was my teacher, who's very popular guitarist, lives in Toronto. Sonny Greenwich, who's one of my all-time favorites, who I still keep in touch with. He's a legend up there. He was given the Order of Canada, which is like a presidential medal. And Nelson Simons, those were, and Peter Leach, who lives in New York now. Those were the local legends that really had an impact. I used to go out and watch them all the time and got to know them. Of course, Ted I took lessons from. And there was a club in Montreal back in the mid-'70s when I was in college that all the jazz and blues legends would perform 5-night gigs. They come up for a week. And I was working at the college radio station, so I used to get in free on opening nights on Tuesdays. I got to meet a lot of these guys. George Benson performed there. It was before Breezin', and he was a club act, and I was absolutely blown away when I saw him up close. I was a big fan, the CTI era when he had Beyond the Blue Horizon, White Rabbit. Those were and still are some of my favorite recordings. And at that same time, I was a big fan of the Crusaders. And I would look at the liner notes and see this guy playing guitar, Larry Carlton. I was like, who is this guy? I like what he's doing, and I want to emulate that sound. And I was very much influenced by him. Lee Ritenour came a couple of years later into my experience, but it was a combination of all those guys in Montreal that I knew and saw all the time, and all the legends that would come to the club from out of town. And that pretty much laid the foundation for the direction I wanted to go in.
Well, you know, you mentioned Larry Carlton and Lee Ritenour. I guess, were you a fan of Foreplay?
Oh yeah, that came later.
Yeah.
Yeah, that came much later. And
of course, Chuck Loeb too is former, well, now the great late, Chuck Lorber.
Yeah, Chuck Loeb. Yeah, he was great. I met him one time at a show. Very nice guy. And I met Lee one time. And Larry I've met several times. He lives here in Nashville, actually. And, so those guys really had a lot to do with the direction that I chose to pursue.
Mentioning the Crusaders, massive fan of theirs. The Joe Sample, Wilton Felder, Styx Hooper, Wayne Henderson on trombone, and Larry Colton. Yeah, I mean that was one ensemble, and I was very fortunate. I saw them live and shook Joe Sample's hand, but we'll keep that quiet. So. Excellent. Some of the names that and when you listening to your music and that, I can hear. I mean, you've got your own, obviously, very distinctive style of music, but there is a little bit of Larry Carlton. There's a little bit of George Benson you can hear in that, and hope we're gonna listen to a bit of that live later in the show. Now, in 1989, you composed and produced an original soundtrack for a CTV, a Canadian network station documentary, Lost Treasure of the Titanic. I'm not going to do a pun of a sinking sensation on that. Following that project, and you recorded your debut CD, Hidden Treasures, on the contemporary jazz NAC record format. How did things change for you after that?
Well, a friend of mine was producing the TV show, and he's my oldest and closest friend who lives out in California. And he asked if I would do the soundtrack for the documentary. It was way before the movie came out about the Titanic. And so that was really my first experience working in a studio doing a really professional type of production. And I learned a lot. I went in there, had really no experience or clue what I was doing, but I worked it out. And I had been writing some demos in my small home studio at the time, and I played them for the guys in the recording studio when I did that soundtrack, and they said, "This is good stuff, you should make a record." And I had no idea how to go about doing that. Somehow I found my way through that path and put out the first CD in 1990. And I really didn't have an idea of how to promote it or anything, but I figured some things out along the way. And next thing you know, it was on the charts. It was on all the radio stations all over the country. And I thought, this is really good. And it was a nice surprise. And I thought, I need to keep doing this. And all of a sudden, the radio station in the Tampa Bay area where I was living offered for me to do some shows, some pretty big ones. And I put a group together to perform the music, because at the time I did that recording, I didn't even have a group yet. And it led to a lot of success. And we had a lot of shows from that point on in Florida. We were a big act regionally and performed a lot at Disney in Orlando. They had a beautiful jazz club there in the 90s. And it just kept going. I just kept making more CDs as I would write and have the music ready. And it's been a really nice ride for me to this time.
Well, Les, given the breadth of your career, and you've spoken to that, but as a composer, an arranger, a performer, and a producer, what gives you the biggest rush? Live performances, composing, or producing?
I would say live performance is really the most exciting thing that I experience, when the band is really together, and every time we play, it's always different. There's a lot of improvisation in what we do, and we react to or respond to what's going on with the audience and how guys are playing or interpreting what they're doing. And so it's a unique experience, and it's really the most exciting thing when it's done right. In the studio, when a project or a song comes to life, it's very rewarding. It's a really special feeling when I have an idea in my head for a composition and then hear it come together as I'm producing it or working with a producer. It's just very refreshing and very rewarding. It feels great. And of course, in that process, you got to listen to the song at least 100 times while you're producing it. So that maybe changes your perception in some ways, where the live performance, it's immediate and it's just a one-off deal, and that's what you get. So I would say, to answer your question, I love the live performance and how it makes me feel, and getting that instant feedback from the audience, but not to invalidate any value of composing and recording, because that's really special too.
Well, I know when you're recording, I mean, when you're on the stage performing live, if everybody's in the pocket at the same time, I mean, the audience can pick up on that and they let you know. I know that's got to be something that makes it extremely enjoyable.
Yeah, I love it. And we got a couple of good venues here, or more than a couple, but a couple that I've been playing at frequently here in Nashville up until last year when things got shut down. But I'll be back, and it's great playing here in town.
What we're going to do then, because there may be a few people, believe it or not, there may be a few people in the UK who are watching this going, well, this is fabulous, but I've never actually heard of this gentleman's music. And I mean, shock horror, I know. But this is your 8th album. It is a stunning album. It's called Tranguility. We're going to take a very quick break from the interview. We'll be straight back. We're going to be playing one of the great tracks called Keep Pushing. You're listening to Jazz Across the Pond with Kevin and myself.
That was Les Sabler's fantastic pre-release single, Keep Pushing, from his latest project, Tranquility. Now, Les, with this project, you switched to a vintage Gibson guitar, and you've been quoted as saying, the guitar sound is a sonic departure from anything I'd previously recorded. I will say, as an avid fan of yours, the new addition to your guitar collection is definitely a winner. But to pick up from where we left off, in 2014, you moved from Miami to Nashville. What were the opportunities that lured you to the home of the Grand Ole Opry?
Well, I thought I had kind of done everything I could in Florida. I actually was living on the West Coast. I was in Miami for a few years until 1981, then lived on the West Coast of Florida in Sarasota, and then later Tampa. And my parents had passed away, and I just didn't have anything holding me back, and I thought I had accomplished pretty much what I could living there. And for many years, I wanted to live in a music-based city. Thought I'd end up in LA because I've got friends out there. The smooth jazz is pretty much based there. However, I had done part of my previous recording that came out in 2014, Jobim Tribute. I'd recorded part of that here in Nashville and got exposed to the scene here. And my sister lives in Knoxville, which is a couple hours away from here, and much more reasonable cost of living, less traffic problems. As much as my heart was wanting me to live in LA to further my career, I thought this would be a good opportunity here in Nashville. And they have every type of music represented here.
Oh, yeah.
You know, originally it was country, but they have everything here. And there's some amazing musicians. There's so many of them. And it turned out to be a great move for me. Really, really good.
Now, if our researchers, we're usually pretty good, we're usually pretty hot on this. If our researchers are correct, are we right in saying that when Paul Brown, a certain Mr. Paul Brown, was in Nashville performing a gig, and you went to the gig and you actually hang out with Paul, and it was on that night that Paul offered you to record and produce the Tranquility album. Is that correct?
That's exactly what happened. It was a pretty special moment for me. What happened was when I first moved here in 2014, I saw that he was going to be doing a show here in town. So we went out to see. I wanted to know what kind of audience there was for the contemporary jazz or smooth jazz here in town, see what kind of crowd would show up. And I had met Paul before in Florida. And so we went and I said hello to him. And there was a big crowd there that night. It was a great show. And he said something to the manager of the venue that he should consider having me play there. So thanks to Paul, that became my home base for gigs for about 4 years. And then Paul was coming back a year ago, December, to the same place for another show. And I was asked by the manager to come out for the evening. Didn't know that he was going to seat me at the band table. And that was nice. So we were hanging out, and casually during the course of the evening on one of the breaks, Paul made that suggestion, and I was floored because I have a lot of respect for him. He's pretty much the leader in production, and he's worked with so many of the great artists who have been successful in this genre. I wouldn't be so presumptive to ask him about working together, and when he brought it up, I was floored. And of course, instant response, yeah, when do we start? You know.
But let's also just say then, because it wasn't just that great moment when he offered his services and said he wants to produce. You'd got 7 fabulous albums out. I mean, they are absolutely. I mean, there's just literally you can just go through the collection. I've got most of them around here. But then when you went into the studio, he actually suggested you change your guitar and to swap your favorite guitar for Paul Brown's vintage Gibson, the Jimmy Smith model. Again, that was a very great moment. Would you agree with that? An incredible decision.
That really changed the texture of the album. I played this 335 here. I'll show it to you. This guitar here, I've had since 1979. And it's been my go-to guitar on all my records. Let's put that back down. I played that in all my shows and all my recordings, other than when I played nylon string. and it's always worked very well for me. Of course, it was the Carlton and Rittenauer influence that led me to buy that instrument in the first place, and I was always very comfortable with it. But Paul was looking for a different sound, and he handed me his Johnny Smith. I always wanted a big arch top, but they're pretty pricey, and it's something I was thinking about at some point I'd get one. And we recorded one song, Keep Pushing, and I felt really comfortable, and the sound it was a departure. It took things in a different direction, and I thought, I want consistency in the project. I want a couple of nylon string songs because I've done pretty well with the songs that I've done on nylon, but I wanted that to be the primary instrument. And when I got back to Nashville after that session, I started looking around for one, and this is what I came up with. 1967. This guitar is very special, and
the holy grail of guitars.
It's known, it's got the reputation as probably the best. I mean, the D'Angelico is what it was based on, and Johnny Smith played a D'Angelico back in the 50s, and when he worked a deal with Gibson, they modeled this guitar after that design, made some changes to it, and it's got the reputation as the go-to model. L5, Super 400, Johnny Smith. They're all similar in some ways and each a little bit different. And it's got a great texture.
Well, what we're going to do very, very quickly, just to demonstrate to everybody, with the age of technology now, we're actually going to play a short bit of Bridge the Gap, your album from 2003, showing the guitar you've just formally mentioned. And then we're going to segue it into another track from your brand new album, The Crescent City Strut. And it will show people, it will let our listeners exactly demonstrate the distance. We'll be straight back with Jazz Across the Pond in this fabulous interview. Stay with us.
So Tranguility is definitely a brilliant collaboration between you and Paul as co-composer and producer. And of course, Paul brings in a fantastic core of his studio musicians, and the two of you craft Tranguility, which has been heralded as one of your best projects to date. Now, you've already alluded a little bit about that experience with Paul in the studio, but when you got to put together that final product and had it in your hand, how did that feel?
Amazing. I'm so happy with this recording. Every song is just done so well, and each one has its own place on the recording. There's no filler. All the songs stand on their own.
That's for sure.
And, I collaborated with some really great composers. Shane Theriot, he's the music director of Hall & Oates, came up with partially written number of songs. I think he contributed 5 songs to the project and also played on them. And a lot of those songs were written after he heard what I play and how I sound. So he kind of came up with some ideas tailor-made for me. And the other composers, Jeff Carruthers, really good songs. So I I'm just sonically, and obviously Paul's production skills are off the chart. I mean, there's nobody that compares to him. I mean, I worked with Brian Bromberg on Sweet Drive. It was really, really stellar production with some of the best musicians in LA. It was a dream for me to play with those guys. But overall, Paul brought compositional ideas as well as the production skill set that really brought this thing together and made it cohesive. And really, really thrilled with the way it came out. And obviously the response has been good.
Well, it is, and we've had loads of messages come in saying, you can't wait for this interview to come out. You've been referred to as a cool cat, and you're the coolest guitarist around. So, but it is a stunning album, and if you call yourself a jazz fan, you have to add this to your collection. Now, very quickly, because we want to hear you play that fabulous guitar. You mentioned in 2014 you did an amazing tribute to Antonio Carlos Jobim, and it's a wonderful. And my question to you very quickly is: a lot of people have done some great tributes to the bossa nova sounds of Mr. Jobim and have gone through the Gola from Ipanema wave meditation. Yeah, okay, here we go, a different variation. You were very brave and brilliant because you've gone for a selection of a tribute, but not the ones maybe people would recognize. First of all, what was the conscious decision on that?
Well, I went to Brazil. Can't remember what year it was, 2009, I think, or 2010. And I wanted to, I'd never been there, never been to South America. I wanted to experience some of the different places where Jobim traveled or got his inspiration, whether it was Copacabana Mountain or Ipanema Beach or some of the other places, the botanical gardens. He used to go there for inspiration. So I wanted to go to these places and see if I can absorb some of that. I went to a record store, which was just a few doors down from Garota de Ipanema, which is the bar where he saw the girl walk by and wrote the song. It's still a restaurant bar. I went there, had a beer, and I went into this record store down the street and I said, load me up with a bunch of CDs and DVDs of Brazilian jazz. I want to take stuff home and learn. And I got some recordings, and Jobim has a huge catalog of songs that, you know, everybody knows Wave and Ipanema, and of course I played those many times in my career. But I brought it home and started practicing these songs deeper into his catalog, just not for the idea that I was going to make a recording, just because I wanted to learn his concepts.
Right.
And I figured by learning these songs, it would help me in future compositional attempts that I would make for my music. But then I got done. I spent 3 years practicing these songs every day. And there was quite a bit of complexity in them. They don't sound that complex sometimes, but when you start digging in, there's a lot of stuff going on there that you wouldn't even know about. And then I got done practicing and learning them and even singing in Portuguese phonetically. I don't speak the language. Wow. And then I thought, you know, I learned all this, I may as well make a record. So that's what I ended up doing. And obviously the results speak for themselves. It went very, very well with that project.
Well, Les,
and that's the background on that.
Well, Les, your tribute has gotten a lot of accolades. And I will say, Roger and I both love that project. I hear a little bit of Charlie Bird in that. And of course, you know, Charlie Bird and Stan Getz have been described as masterful interpreters of a music defined by composers like Antonio Carlos Jobim. And Roger and I just wanted to say, your tribute places you in that same category as a sensitive interpreter of Antonio's compositions, and we want to thank you for that.
I appreciate that. I got to tell you one anecdote, though. The week that CD was released, there was a concert in Miami, tribute to Jobim, starring Lee Ritenour and Daniel Jobim, his grandson.
Wow.
And my CD had just come out that week, and I had bought tickets and traveled to Miami with a couple of friends to go to the show. And I brought a copy of the CD. I was hoping maybe I could meet Daniel, because when I was recording this, I thought, oh, somehow I got to find a way to get it to their family to show respect and say, you know, not a pat on the back, just say, here, I love your grandfather. I read his book, or the book that was written about him, and watched his life story in a DVD. And so I was able to meet Daniel after the show, and hand him the CD. And he said to me, "I heard about this," and I about fell over. And that was a pretty big moment in my life.
Oh, what a story. Well, if you're anybody sitting there going, I want to buy more of this stuff, this man's amazing. There are 8 albums out. We've already spoken about Tranquility. There is Crescent Shores, there's Sweet Drive, there's Bridge the Gap, there's the Jobim Tribute. They're all out there. There are fabulous albums. We've got them all in our collection here and that. And Les, we can't thank you enough. We're going to finish now with you actually finishing the show. We've never done this before. We'd like you to finish off the song, the show tonight, playing a track from the Tranquility. I think I'm right in saying you're going to be playing In the Light.
Okay, let me see if I can pull this up here. And,
while you're doing that, ladies and gentlemen, you've been watching Jazz Across the Pond. Next week, we're back with Mr. Bob Baldwin, another great interview, a guy from New York City. Looking forward to that. Meanwhile, say goodbye, Kevin.
Goodbye, Kevin.
And it's goodbye from him. From everybody here, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to leave you in the very, very capable hands of the one, the only, Mr. Les Sabler. Ladies and gentlemen, all over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Been a pleasure.
Mm-hmm.